We talk sports, why we like them, and what they might say about us on this week's podcast.
Bald,
blind,
and buddies. Timmy C, how the hell are you? It's Masters Sunday, and I know you're a rabid sports fan, so I'm excited to hear about your feelings on, Amen Corner holes 15, 16, 17. How do you feel about that, Tim?
Yeah, we will hit that. Sports
We will.
is the topic of interest today. Yeah.
Well, why don't you give sort of broad strokes overview of what we're going to talk about in terms of that? Because you brought this up, and I thought, you know what? That's actually quite interesting.
Well, I am not a golf guy or a baseball guy, and I know you are. So I wanted to hear what you like about it, what draws you to it, because clearly you're not alone. And I'd talk a little bit about football, but also my thoughts on why we like sport in general and what it says, and then if we have time, I'll go into some complaints about the NFL.
Very European, by the way. You called it sport, not
Sport.
sports.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like it, actually.
When I got my letter of acceptance, they outlined where I could live and what you can do in downtown London. Not that you necessarily needed to be reminded of what was available in downtown London, but they had a whole section called sport. Not sports, sport.
What's interesting, though, is they say maths.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, and schedule. I mean...
Well, I like schedule. I say
like
that
schedule.
one myself, too. Yeah,
schedule's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some other ones we should get into.
So. I drop a few every now and then. Aeroplane.
Well, cheers to me is just awesome because it's like cheers. Cheers. It's the universal hello. It's like aloha. It's universal hello, goodbye. Here's to a drink. Here's to good friends. Here's to buzz off.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.
It's perfect. Yeah. Well, Timmy, why don't you fill us in, on the podcast? You had a story about the University of Wisconsin, which you've already told me about, which I can't wait to hear.
An update.
But I'm also wanted to give the answer to last week's trivia question.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So, the saying, John, a fool and their money are soon parted?
That is correct.
I've been trying to pay to advertise a little bit for our podcast on YouTube because, we know we have a good thing. You guys know you have a good thing. We want more people to know. So I've been trying to advertise, and you'd be amazed at the hoops. I had to say I wasn't doing European politics ads.
Well, I'm sure that has to do with the data privacy rights and regulations and such.
I basically, I think, had to prove I wasn't a Russian bot, so...
But all that sounds reasonable.
It's reasonable.
They seem like reasonable expectations, don't you think?
Yeah. So we're getting there. We may or may not be running something now, so we'll see.
Okay. I always joke, we have something because of the backstory. I think the backstory is interesting to people that we're two buddies who've been friends for 30 plus years. And it doesn't hurt that we have only the second person ever to be a blind doctor on the podcast. But I'm 99% sure they're not turning in for the bald part of the podcast with the dad bod. Although you did, what did you call it? A value add? You're like, well, your value add for our guests is
it's totally a value add. Yeah.
And I was like, when did you become a highly paid management consultant?
Well, but AI is totally going to do that. But
you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they can do a lot. They can make the pretty graphs and they can look at the numbers. But so speaking of AI, the firing of Jay Rothman, president of the University of Wisconsin's system, actually went through. That was my whack job of the week. Was the board of regents who were just kind of hemming and hawing. You want to hear what?
So he was officially terminated, which
fired.
Is a heavy lift for somebody in academia, particularly somebody who's tenured.
No, he's not tenured. He's a lawyer from somewhere else who they brought in. So this is how the president works. Yeah, no, he's not tenured. But what's interesting, John, is their complaints are, well, how he's talking about the firing is rather one-sided. Well, duh. That was
you
a
don't
complaint.
say.
You don't
say.
Don't say. And he didn't share credit enough. And when you got egos, right? He didn't stroke their egos enough. And he took too long. For example, it took him too long to come up with an AI policy. Can you imagine an AI policy? I think there's 13 institutions in the University of Wisconsin system. An AI policy spanning, the softer sciences, everything. Can you
The
imagine
College
how,
of Liberal Arts, the
yeah,
business school, the medical school, the whole deal. Yeah.
but like it's amazingly complicated. So that's their complaints, which whatever.
Well, two things dovetailing on that. Number
Yeah.
one, I think it's okay that you don't have an AI policy because it's going to be it's not even going to be worth the paper it's written on in 6 months, right? I mean, this stuff is
be.
evolving and we just don't know where it's taking us. I know it's a powerful tool. I think that the promise of it is very, very unique. I also think it can be overstated. I don't think it's going to, suddenly change everything. People got all bent out of shape about the automobile. And Henry Ford used to say, if I asked consumers what they'd want, they'd say they wanted a faster horse. Mm-hmm. So I don't think the AI policy, not having a tangible AI policy is a big deal because look at how much TVs have changed in the last 20 years, right? And secondarily, my favorite quote about academia is Henry Kissinger. Do you know what he said?
Oh, it's they fight so much because it matters so little or something like that?
The stakes in academia, or the fights in academia, are so intense because the stakes are so small. Yeah.
Here's what you do, John. You just have Chat GPT write your AI policy, and then you're done.
Yeah. Now, I do want to preface this before I tell this story because I have 2 daughters. I'm married. I have a wife. I have a mother, a sister. So I have the utmost respect for women. And as I've said to you multiple times, Timmy, I signed up for liberalism so everyone could have equal rights, including my daughters, not so that people in San Francisco could defecate in the street and call it freedom of expression, right? Mm-hmm. But I was trying to explain academia to someone one time, and I said, have you ever seen the movie As Good as It Gets with Jack Nicholson? Mm-hmm. And there's a famous scene in there where this girl says, how do you write women so well? And she says, it means somebody out there knows what it's like to be in here. And she starts tapping her heart. And Melvin Udall, who's played by Jack Nicholson, is this sardonic, bitter sort of romance writer. And she says, how do you write women so well? And his response was, I think of a man and I take away reason and accountability. And I was trying to explain academia to someone, and I said, imagine a functioning business with an employee role and HR responsibilities and profit margins to worry about. Take away reason and accountability. And there you have academia.
There you go.
I mean, in a lot of ways, right? So, and one of my laments, we'll get into our topic of the day now, but one of my laments is university presidents, and it sounds like this is what Wisconsin system did. They bring in somebody, he probably had connections through the yin yang. It's basically fundraisers in chief. They're there to get money out of the well-endowed donors and so forth, and build new buildings and blah blah blah. It's an arms race without nuclear arms, basically.
Right.
So, yeah. But Timmy, let me do an update real quick on the trivia question.
Yep.
You ready?
Mm-hmm.
So last week we were talking about the Masters, and the answer, of course, was Jack Nicklaus. The Masters is going on as we are speaking. By the way, we are recording this. That's how dedicated we are to our craft. Right. Oh, yeah. And I had asked because UConn was playing Michigan in the NCAA finals this past Monday, and if UConn had won, they would have been the first team in quite a bit to win titles in 3 out of 4 years. And I had asked who was the last team to do that. Do you know who it was, Tim?
Arkansas.
No, it was UCLA way back when, before you and I were even born. I think their run started in I forget what it was, but they won 10 straight.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, it was a different game then, but I mean, epic names came through UCLA, including Lou Alcindor, who later became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Walton, Gil Goodrich, all these people that, are sort of household names, even for people that are not sports fans. So, but that was the last team way back in the 60s and into the early 70s. So,
that's cool.
Yeah. But my question today is, opening day has happened in baseball. I love baseball, and you can ask me why, and I'll explain. What was the longest game in terms of time on opening day?
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah. So, well, Timmy, why don't you lay the groundwork? I want to hear from you from a psychiatric perspective, because the way, if you don't mind, Tim, I'll read what you wrote me.
Okay.
About sport, if that's cool.
Sure.
Right? Okay. He says, I have 2 ideas, and he throws out the 2 ideas, and Tim says, with spring here, I thought we could talk about sports. I'm curious what you, and I assume you mean me, appreciate about baseball and golf. I could hit on theories about why we like sports and to watch them. With the NFL draft coming up, we can talk about that spectacle and process and how much comes down to trying to predict future human behavior. So, I was fascinated because I've never actually been asked that before. They say that George H.W. Bush, they asked him one time, why do you want to be president? And he fumbled around. Mm-hmm. And there is an argument. I don't necessarily agree with it. For me, it's 98% the economy, as to why he lost re-election, because he was unable to answer that in a satisfactory way. Mm-hmm. And the joke when he was leaving office, he said, I never understood that vision thing. because presidents are supposed to have three things: a vision, a ship to guide, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I never understood that vision thing, but I had never actually tangibly been asked, why do I like sports? So you hold court, Tim, ask me questions as you see fit, and I'll try to explain it. But I think sports is just innately entertaining. So
Yeah, I think humanity would agree with you. Like from throughout human history in pretty much all cultures, there's some level of sport or competition, right? You also see in mammals, especially as juveniles, they play, right? And that's how they learn some adult skills. So sport is pretty innate to us as
hardwired,
people.
essentially.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think in modern society, I think one of the things is observing excellence in an accessible format. So, somebody writes a great poem, great, you got to read it. You got to, somebody recommends a book. You have to invest a heck of a lot of time, but you can, at a glance, see a grand slam or see somebody make a toe tap catch on the sidelines, right? Like, so I think it also is that idea of observable excellence. And in the individual space, I think we can, as a person who, runs or things like that, you can see yourself getting better at a metric. You're like, how do I know I'm a better dad? You're not going to know for quite a while, but you can know you could do more push-ups next week.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So
Yeah.
there's a quantifiable result.
Developmental result that we can achieve too as individuals.
Question for you, because this led to my thinking of something. I have a buddy of mine, Adam, who is just the ultimate cynic. I mean, just a very dry British sense of humor, very funny. But I asked him one time, aren't you disappointed? And it just so happens, and I certainly don't want to kick him while he's down because it appears he might have a drug addiction. Tiger Woods. Mm-hmm. He has had multiple surgeries. I think he's had, a dozen or more surgeries. They're given these powerful pain pills. He was arrested for being under the influence. This is now his second or third time. I don't want to minimize or make light of it, but he also had that issue with his wife. And I asked my buddy Adam one time, I said, do you ever get dissuaded, about Tiger Woods being kind of a dirtbag in his personal life? And he said, no. He said, I look at him like he's a trained monkey in the circus. Dance for me. They're entertainers. And I think that is how he sees it. I find myself enjoying sports when I can root for people as well. How about you? Or do you?
Yeah. That makes sense. So tell me about baseball. Cause to me, it's kind of plotting and the same and, all statistics. Like what's good about baseball? Why should I be interested theoretically?
I'm always reminded, and I believe you haven't seen it, right? Field of Dreams?
No, I actually haven't.
Yeah. Well,
and I'm from Iowa.
That's so unacceptable to me. I mean, that is just so unacceptable. But there is a fabulous soliloquy in there by James Earl Jones, who plays this writer that's going to write about what he saw at this field in Iowa, right? And I won't ruin it for people that haven't seen the movie, but he talks about, this country has rolled on like a steamroller, and we've gone through World War I, World War II, the Great Depression, but through it all, the one consistent has been baseball.
The one constant through all the years, Ray, has been baseball. America has rolled by like an army of steamrollers. It's been erased like a blackboard, rebuilt and erased again. But baseball has marked the time. This field, this game, is a part of our past, Ray. It reminds us of all that once was good, and it could be again. Oh, people will come, Ray. People will most definitely come.
Do I think that that's over-dramatizing it for Hollywood purposes? Of course, but there is something timeless, number one, about baseball that is not present, I think, in other sports because it has been around for so long. And the foundational abstract of the game has not changed very much. So what I mean is in certain sports, like even with the Masters going on, there is now an argument afoot that they should use a different ball that doesn't travel as far because these guys are in the gym. The equipment is so much better than it was even 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago that it's just not even measurable in terms of the records that were achieved by, say, Jack Nicklaus versus the records today because these guys can hit it 50 yards further. You don't have that with baseball. The structure of the parks has largely remained intact. There's different variations and so forth. And the other thing that I just absolutely love about baseball is It's a combination, number one, of teamwork, because there's 9 guys in the field, but then individualism, because when you're at the bat, you're on an island by yourself facing a pitcher, right? So there's that combination, which I find fascinating. Secondarily, and where I really began to appreciate the brilliance and the beauty of baseball, was listening to Joe Morgan, who played second base for the Cincinnati Reds, the Big Red Machine that won all those titles in the 70s. And he was a fabulous analyst on baseball. And until you actually listen to guys that know the game and follow all the intricacies and ins and outs and so forth, it is a fabulously involved strategic chess match, for lack of a better term. I mean, it's kind of, in many ways, almost comparable to chess. There is strategy, there is, situational awareness, there are things that can be done. And,
Is that like in the batting order, or like what kind of things? Like,
so
what
there's
changes?
a man on second. There's one out. You're up by 1. It's fundamentally different than if you're down. Depending on what inning it is, do you sacrifice bunt that person over to get, and who's coming up next? Do you have your best hitter up who is, has a tendency to hit fly balls and can get him in on a sacrifice fly? Just things of that nature, that individual situations, it seems very straightforward. You throw the ball, you hit the ball, you catch the ball. That's it, right? They call them 5-tool players. Can he hit for power? Can he hit for average? Does he play defense? Does he have speed? Does he have an arm, right? And to me, it's just, there are so many ins and outs with baseball. And I really appreciate football. And football, to me, is a fabulously entertaining game. As you know, my loves in order, Timmy, are Notre Dame football, the New York Yankees, and then the New York Giants. That's who I would like to see win titles. But why I say that is if you say that to an average NFL fan, they'd be like, no, that's insane. I want my NFL team. I tend to love baseball. I would much rather have the Yankees win the World Series than see the Giants win the Super Bowl. Again, first world problems. These are not, and by the way, in the last couple of years, it has not presented itself as being a problem with the Giants being as bad as they are. But baseball, to me, is just an absolutely fabulous illustration. Now, do I watch 162 games? No. But I love going to minor league baseball even more than Major League Baseball.
Yeah,
just because of the
I
atmosphere,
could totally agree with that. Yeah.
the hot dog, the beer. You see these guys. It's just it. Plus, it's Americana. It's summer. You're outside. I don't know. I could keep going, but that's kind of for me why baseball is what it is. I love baseball, and it is so enjoyable to me. It's only actually enjoyable after the fact, after you know whether or not your team has won the World Series or not. But I love when the Yankees are in the playoffs and I have something to do at 5:00 on a Tuesday night because they're, in the best of 5 series against fill in the blank or this or that. It's just, and there is so much unrecognized strategy involved in baseball that I just think that it's very similar to chess in terms of moves and timing and just situational awareness. It's just, to me, it's just the ultimate team sport.
Yeah. I read Moneyball, right? Which is a classic book.
About Billy Beane, right?
Yeah.
The Oakland A's.
About trying to replace players in aggregate. And like, I just got a piece of, some of the strategy of which was really cool.
And he's doing this in a vacuum. You haven't assumed, what if a player gets injured or his wife has a baby and he has to be out for this 3-game series? And, it's a 162 game season. So it's not for the faint of heart, number one. And number two, it's just, it's really a marathon. I mean, you're a runner. It's really a marathon. It is not a sprint.
Yeah.
And, like the Yankees started out very strongly this year. I think they started out 7-1 or 7-2. And I think they've lost 5 out of 6 or 5 out of 7. But in the aggregate, they're still above 500. So it's just, to me, it's just representative of so much more than just sports or sport, as you say. The one thing, and I've gone to my grave saying this, the current president of the United States is responsible for a coup d'etat on January 6, 2021, and it is not the World Series. It's the national championship. But we'll save that for another day.
So what about, you said Joe Morgan was one of the analysts?
Yeah.
Is that, so you would listen to him call games, or how would you appreciate his analysis?
Both. Yeah. I mean, just listening to him, and I didn't it really was when in my formative years when we were teenagers, and I was watching sports religiously. Now I have 3 children, and if I can catch a game, you're happy, blah, blah, blah. But just listening to, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that. I didn't know that was a thing, that you never do this when there's a man on second, you're down by 1, or you do this and you don't do that. Like, just so many different things go into it that oftentimes, and it's gotten away from it because it's all about putting butts in the seats, and how do you put butts in the seats, home runs. Yeah. But what is affectionately referred to as small ball, which is bunting and sacrificing a guy over, and just little things that in the aggregate make a difference over the course of 162 games. So
That's really cool.
yeah, just when you look at Derek Jeter, if you study his stats, he never won MVP. He never won a batting title, but he is unquestionably a Hall of Famer. And even Red Sox fans would admit that. And actually, they did a commercial about that, which was very sweet when he retired, with Red Sox fans even saluting him. But the point being is he was such an integral cog in a machine that just did all the things. It's when Obama became president, he talked about his grandmother who had died the night before he was elected. He talked about how she was one of these millions of unrecognized Americans who do all the right things, pay their taxes, put food on the table, blah, blah, blah. And I think that is an element of baseball that I appreciate because there are so many different parts. Of course, Shohei Ohtani is fabulous and, Aaron Judge is fabulous and so forth. But it's guys that play third base and hit for doubles and, make the sacrifice and the right catch. And if you need to understand baseball, read George Will. I mean, he writes about it. He loves baseball, so.
Well, I like when you talked about the team aspect. And I think that's a powerful part about sport too, is people coming together to be more than the sum of the parts, right? You think about early humans, we probably, traveled in bands and had to unite to solve problems, whether that's drive off a predator, whether that's hunt, whether that's, whatever it is. This coming together to overcome a challenge, I think is another part of the drama. I mean, we make movies about it, the Miracle on Ice, remember the Titans, Hoosiers, right? I that taps into something about us, I think.
I think any sports movie, and the ones you mentioned, Hoosiers and so forth, they're not sports movies. They're stories of humanity that happen to involve sports. It's an avenue to tell the story of humanity. Now, in terms of golf, I like golf, and it's funny too because I am competitive about a lot of stuff. Even my brothers, they would never want to play me in ping pong because it's a goddamn ping pong game, and I'd get all fired up, right? Some reason when I play golf, I'm not competitive at all, Timmy. I just enjoy it. I genuinely I understand people's competitive nature, but the idea that the difference between the guy that wins the Masters in a couple hours and the guy who finishes second was one stroke. And if you actually think about it, par is 288 swings. So that guy took, let's just say 12 under, wins it. He took 276, and the guy who didn't win it took 277 over the course of 4 days. To me, it's like, is he significantly a better dog? Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? It doesn't resonate with me. I enjoy the heck out of playing golf. My buddy actually invites me a handful of times during the summer. They've got a standing foursome, and I kind of am the fill-in, and I'm completely fine with being the fill-in because a lot of times I can't make it work with the kids' schedules and such. I genuinely enjoy golf. I like watching golf 4 times a year, and that's during the majors, one of which is going on right now. There's something about the Masters. It signifies the beginning of spring. It's always right around, Easter, the blooming of the flowers and blah, blah, blah. I mean, do I think that the CBS and the Masters take themselves way too seriously? Of course. That being said, though, it to me just is symbolic much more so than anything. And I like seeing excellence play out. And to my buddy Adam's point, if you think of these guys as entertainers, you don't have to like them as people. And I remind myself, there's people I work with that I don't particularly care for, but I get along with at work. Right. So it's a difficult thing for me to deal with, but I love watching excellence play itself out in any avenue. And these guys are clearly excellent, So.
Yeah.
But horse racing is the other one. I'm a horse racing fan at most 3 times a year.
Yeah.
Most of the time, 2 times a year, because you watch the Kentucky Derby, and if the horse that won the Kentucky Derby doesn't win the second leg, I don't watch the third one.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So that's kind of how I am in terms of being a golf fan. I watch it, and my father, I grew up watching it in the background, so it kind of brings back nostalgic memories of my dad growing up and so forth. So there's an element of that.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
yeah, I didn't grow up around doctors, kind of, middle class, middle of Iowa. And there was always those jokes about the doctors going off to play golf, and surgeons love golf. It's really amazing. And I think it does a lot.
Do they really?
Yeah. No, they're totally into it. And if you think about a surgery, what is it? You're sort of doing the same thing, over and over, but you're refining it and you're getting better. And there's outside variables, of course, right? Weather, wind, etc. on the golf course, just like in surgery. But I think they love it. And it's a cliche, but it's also true. A time saver, right? So,
Stereotypes are a real time saver.
Yeah.
But I think most guys, and I shouldn't be sexist, but if you have a chance to go with the guys, it's usually for a guys trip. It's golf. It involves golf in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Have you played? Do you like it?
I have not played. There is a blind golf association where they think they have beepers on the cups, and
Yeah.
So it's totally doable. It just doesn't super appeal to me.
Yeah, but you like running, and that to me is just I would much rather weigh 1,000 pounds than have to run.
Yeah.
I would. But by the same token, I love swimming. The peace. I mean, you know me. I can't sit in silence.
Right.
I have to, and it's annoying. I get it. I'm kind of like Del Griffith from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Never knows when to keep his big trap shut. But I enjoy the heck out of swimming, and I don't listen to music or anything. I just and today I made it a point to go for my 4-mile walk without my phone.
Oh, cool.
So that I didn't, and let kind of your mind wander.
I think a lot of people on the golf course too. It's a place where they can have an excuse to disconnect, and I think that's healthy.
Well, I remember my father. He was a very good golfer and played with some regularity. We belonged to a club growing up, and I was out there with my son recently. My wife and the girls went with grandma to do some stuff or go to the pool, and my dad and my son and I went out on the golf course, and my dad said to me on one of the holes, "What did you get on that hole?" I said, "Dad, I think I got a par, or I might have bogeyed it." And he says, "How can you not know?" I said, "Dad, it's a Wednesday in July. I'm outside. It's 82 degrees with my father and my son playing golf. Who cares?"
Yeah.
Right. And it's just, but by the same token, I tend to be competitive about some of the dumbest stuff. So golf to me is very relaxing because I don't care in that sense. So that's really why I enjoy golf.
Yeah.
So. Why do you, what's your theories on humans in sport, by the way, Timmy? I'm curious.
Well, I think.
Well, let me be more specific. Football.
Look, I'll start with what I like about football.
Okay.
I like, for me, as a blind guy, I like the fact it resets play by play. Like basketball, to me is just so flowing that it's harder for me to follow. So I
never thought of that.
Yeah, I like that.
There's a lot of start-stop in football.
Yeah.
A lot of start-stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like how it's the combination of setup, right? The formation, then the scheme, what you're going to do, and then what they do within or around the scheme. It's like music. Like you have the chord progression, but to make, good jazz or something, you improvise sometimes. And I think like that combination of structure and improvisation, I think is really cool. And as far as sports go, there's various body types in football. You've got, people 6'10" to 5'6", people 350 pounds to 160. Right. Like all on the same team. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And the 160-pound guy can oftentimes make way more than the other guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he's fast. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's cool that different types of folks are working.
It's pretty egalitarian in that sense now that you say it out loud. It's pretty democratic.
Yeah. I mean, you look at most baseball players, they probably have they say that guy looks like a baseball player, right? They sort of have one template, but like your offensive tackle and your running back are totally different,
Right. Or wide receiver and safety or cornerback or yeah. Do you think there's an evolutionary aspect to enjoying sports? Meaning we like to see other people, because I'm always troubled why people are fascinated by boxing. And I appreciate, the sweet science of boxing. I do think there's quite a bit of science and expertise in it, but you just have two people beating the shit out of each other, for lack of a better term. To me, it's very unsettling if you actually strip it back, because, think about the Roman Colosseum. I mean, they had lions eating people, and that's still celebrated. There's a great line in Gladiator, the movie from 25 years ago, and they're talking about the emperor, and he's got 100 days of games, and the guy says, he's cleverer than I thought. He said, he'll give the people death, and they'll love him for it. I just wonder if there's an element of that in terms of evolution. Do you agree with that or no? That we just love to see blood, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I mean, Freud would talk about the death drive. But there's definitely, I mean, it's the same thing that has you rubbernecking at an accident on the road, right? We pay attention to danger, and I think seeing it happen to someone else, A, may teach us a lesson, and B, we may feel more comfortable, right?
Huh.
So I think there's...
I never thought of it that way. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, do you remember in the 80s, this was a cult thing when I was in high school, I think. Do you remember Faces of Death?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and they would have people that parachuted off the wrong thing and ended up in a alligator trap. I can't watch that stuff.
Yeah, me either. But we also, you remember we had
Well, you literally can't watch it.
Yeah. But even the fascination with Dateline and serial killers, like we had Professor Schlesinger.
I have that. I am fascinated by
Right?
because it's abnormal behavior. I have it. I am absolutely 100% unequivocally fascinated by that.
And there's threat and danger. And do you remember when the NFL used to have like the hardest hits videos? Like where it was basically like, notifying the lawyers of who to take on as a client for CTE.
Yeah, I get it. But there is an element in me that I enjoy watching it. But by the same token, I'm hypocritical because I worry about my son playing it. But he loves it so much that I don't want to take it away from him.
Yeah.
And I mean, he talks football 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And he's started to hit his growth spurt. He's supposed to be well over 6 feet tall. I still try to kiss the top of his head because I'm not going to be able to do it the rest of my life. But, it's sort of like Americans and their feelings about education. They think the educational system is failing, but you ask about your individual experience, it's fine, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with football. I find myself rooting like a rabid dog for Notre Dame football, but I would prefer my kids not play.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
And we walked that. So Peter played, he was a corner.
Yeah, he's built for that. To your point, he's built exactly like I would anticipate a corner wide receiver. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And, at the high school level, they're not moving that fast. And, corners don't, there's not like a block, a hard lineman block every time. And so we think the trade-off was worth it. And he went off to college and, doing his thing now. Well, the other thing about sports, honestly, I think and this relates to gambling, is the human desire to want to or believe they can predict the future.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you think about gambling. Gambling is this, there's the dopamine hit when you're right, but it's also, I know X, the whole poly market and all that, I know X is going to happen, right? So this totally befuddles me. All this lead up, the NFL draft is going to be in about 2 weeks.
In Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Home of the Steelers.
And people will be like, what is Daniel Jeremiah's latest draft say? What's Mel Kiper talking? There's a podcast I like. They talk about football, and every week they do a mock draft.
Yeah.
They pretend to pick, players for what is totally unknown, but will conclusively be known in 2 weeks, and definitely not be what you said it was going to be. Right. So you're predicting who they're going to pick. And then that's based on predicting how a player is going to be in the future. And I think that's our desire to want to control, to understand the future. And in a theological sense, our desire to be God.
Huh.
Yeah.
Huh. I could see that with gambling. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that with sports, though. Maybe, no, there's probably an element, though, that I could see. Yeah. That you have some knowledge that others do not, and you're going to make a couple bucks off of it, so to speak. Yeah. Yeah. Your
foreknowledge, and so it clearly draws people. But once again, it's like, how many mock drafts can you do? Come on, people.
Well, I mean, the Super Bowl technically starts at like 1 o'clock on Super Bowl Sunday. They don't kick off until 6:47. My dad's like, it's 6 hours of these guys just yammering on. Play the damn game. I mean. Yeah.
And the other thing, the NFL does this masterfully is manufacture scarcity. So, with the salary cap, there's only so many dollars. You can only have so many people on your roster. There's, criteria to how you get to the league. It's like, they tried having the McRib sandwich around all the time, but they realized if they just made it come and go and people would go get the McRib, it had an incredible appeal.
My father says that with Coors Light.
Yeah.
He said you would walk across hot coals when I was in college to get Coors Light. The worst thing they did was make it easy to get.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they went national.
It's the same thing. It's the McRib, basically.
So, but what I'm asking is, you're saying that the NFL, it creates perceived scarcity, and as such, it makes it even more appealing. So to speak.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Fair enough.
And, well, and also, right, so they literally 1/10 the games of baseball, right?
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is, which is amazing if you think about it, because it is something you appreciate, but somebody actually told me one time that they have a metric of how much is actually happening in a 60-minute game, how much actual football, because there's a whole lot of, a running play is the clock runs.
Yeah.
So the play is over, but they're walking back to the huddle. The clock continues to run. So how much actual football is being played in 60 minutes? And it's less than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's less than 10 minutes. If you think about it. And to that end, Katie always likes when the football season's around, because I fold the laundry. And, I'm not terribly good at dealing with my girls' stuff, because they're very similar in size, and girls have 27 things where a boy has one.
Yeah.
Charlie's is a football jersey, shorts, socks, that's it.
Yeah.
We're guys. We're simple, right? Girls, so I usually leave it to my wife to put them away. But she appreciates that I fold the laundry. And the reason I say, and people are like, well, you fold it during the game. And I said, look, the game starts at 1, but it doesn't end until 4:30. So that's 3.5 hours. It's a 60-minute game. So do the math. 75% by definition is not football.
Yeah.
And then even when it is football, guys walking back to the huddle and doing this and, the running play and then this and blah. Literally, it's less than 10 minutes out of a 60-minute game. Now, I love football. I'll be the first person to tell you. So, but I'm fascinated by people's fascination with sports. And I have a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist like you, who just does not understand it.
Yeah.
Why people love sports so much.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Well, Timmy, I have a whack job this week. Are you surprised by this? And it's not the University of Wisconsin.
Well, mine is coming up next week.
Okay. The gift that keeps on giving. We have a rule here on the Bald, Blind, and Buddies podcast that we can't go back to back, because I was going to make Trump my whack job again this week, just for the situation in the Straits of Hormuz and blah, blah, blah. It's insane. But I'm instead going to go with his counterpart, J.D. Vance, for two reasons. Number one, he went over and campaigned in Hungary for Viktor Orban. I don't know if you know who Viktor Orban is, but let me put it to you this way. He's not somebody you would want babysitting your children. He is a tyrant. He is a strongman. This is the vice president of the United States openly campaigning for a totalitarian, basically dictator. He lost and conceded defeat today. So that's number one.
Oh, can I just interject something?
Yeah, please.
If there's campaigning, are they a dictator?
Fair. Well, I mean, to be fair, Saddam Hussein campaigned.
It's Stalin. Stalin had a ballot, right?
Yeah, I don't. This is kind of like you.
Okay.
Trump didn't do certain things because he didn't have a plan of action afterwards. No, he still did it.
Okay.
No, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Even if it's facial campaigning, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. But then the other thing is he serves as the point man in negotiating this deal with Iran. He goes over there, they negotiate in Pakistan for, 20 hours or something. And now Trump is putting a naval blockade on the Straits of Hormuz, the very Straits of Hormuz we're trying to get opened.
Right.
So J.D. Vance to me is worse than Trump, because he is so smart, so well-educated, so capable, and he knows better. And again, I don't blame Trump. He is who he is. I blame the people that are intelligent enough to see it for what it is and still allow it for the pursuit of power. J.D. Vance, to me, is my whack job this week.
Yeah, you know what I see about Vance? To me, he looks rudderless. That's at least one of his challenges. So,
well, if you've given up your soul in the pursuit of power, and I don't want to be, dramatic and blah, 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 but he has done a complete 180 on everything he stood for. Now, whether or not it's legitimate or not, let's assume it is legitimate. That process of doing a 180-degree shift has to take some spunk out of you, right?
Yeah.
What is it to gain power and lose your soul in the process?
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
anyway.
indeed. So speaking of the opposite, heroes, the Carnegie Hero Fund. I didn't know this was a thing, but it is. It gave out awards to two brothers from Columbia, Tennessee. They basically jumped in the river. This is about a year ago. They jumped in the river when they saw an autistic gentleman getting swept away by the current. May 23rd, 2025, Samuel Hardin Adcock and James Allen Garner went in the river after this man. They had to swim downstream. It sounds like it was a pretty intense current. They wound up at points having to stand on a submerged log to hold this guy up. They got him over to roots that they could hold on to until they were rescued. It was cold and wet. Everybody was fine. But just that split second, one of the fathers got his kids out, kids get out of the river, and then went down after this gentleman. They didn't know him, but they knew somebody needed help. And that is the kind of thing that is great about America and human beings.
And that's why we have our hero of the week. I love stories like that. I'd not heard of that. And folks, what do I always say? The dozens and dozens of you that are listening. Timmy and I very rarely share our whack jobs and heroes in advance. Every once in a while we do, but I did not know this was coming. I didn't know this story. So that is just awesome. I'm hearing it as you are. So
yeah,
that's
cool
awesome,
stuff.
Tim. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I am off to watch the end of the Masters, and I'm off to Arizona tomorrow morning. So I'll be en route most of the week, but I'll be back later this week. We'll catch up. And this is John Bullen signing off saying, hey, misbehave, drive fast, take chances.
And this is Tim saying, if everybody likes what you're doing, you're probably not doing anything worthwhile.